You were living what every 30-year-old Canadian woman would consider the American dream. Successful entrepreneur, living the life, and you decided to pack everything, sell everything, get rid of everything, and run into the woods.
This was my chance to develop a relationship with God.
How can we tie like spirituality or spirit back into entrepreneurship?
The more intelligent someone is intellectually, oftentimes they have the most suffering.
People don't believe anymore. They don't trust their government, they don't trust their religions, they don't trust anything external, but most importantly, they don't trust themselves.
But like anything, the paradox is that spirit builds it too.
Welcome to the $1 Billion Journey podcast. My name is Alex Duta, and I'm your host, and I'm building $1 billion empire in the unsexy space of restoration, and I'm super excited to have Miss Stephanie Karlovits join us today.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
I'm super pumped to have you here, and you've been actually really instrumental in my journey and just understanding how things click, and I know I'm not the only one on the entrepreneurial journey that has had this aha moment that, hey, there's a need for belief, there's a need for spirit kind of involved. You know, reading Tim Ferry's book right now, and, you know, moguls like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and actually 80% of the people that he has interviewed on his podcast talk about spirituality, God, and how that fuels for them to be able to impact their mission. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you'd be really surprised about what's going on at the top. I think most people don't know, especially when it comes to tech and sort of these hard sciences. You know, you'd imagine this person to not necessarily be, let's say, deep or like interested in exploring the psyche, or that they're unleashing their childhood trauma, or that they're using crystals or tarot decks or going to angel readers. But absolutely, this is what's happening. And I think it's because as things get really difficult and you go through really complex things, you have to rely on something, and it forces you there.
How do you know this, or how are you so confident on this?
How am I so confident?
Yeah, that the people up at the top.
Well, I work with them.
Interesting. So Stephanie, you were living what every 30-year-old Canadian woman would consider the American dream. Successful entrepreneur, living the life, and you decided to pack everything, sell everything, get rid of everything, and run into the woods.
I did.
Why?
Well, you said that I decided, and here's the thing. It decided me.
Okay.
So it wasn't a choice. I never thought, okay, let's dismantle this whole thing. You know, I'm sick of it, or I don't want it, or something. And I think somewhere inside of me, that was the whisper of like, I want something more. There has to be more than this. But ultimately, I just surrendered. I gave in. I just decided not to fight for it anymore.
What was there to fight for? Or why was there fighting involved?
I don't know. I think the ego just does that. I think it strives. It's not necessarily a fight, but during that time for me was the time of COVID. And so that would have required a fight, definitely, since I owned a health and fitness facility, brick and mortar, 5,000 square foot clinic, personal training, smoothie bar. We were, you know, the enemy basically of COVID, which was like,
everybody needs to be in isolation kind of thing.
We made money off of people breathing hard. Literally.
Wow.
So it was kind of this like precipice of, do I do the same old thing? You know, do I be the Joan of Arc warrior woman and fight for this, which I know how to do. I know how to do that. Do I cleverly find my way to save it and also be taking this as a challenge to maybe open up different avenues of revenue, you know, online, for example, or whatever, which we had no infrastructure for. But you know, these are kind of like mind ideas and concepts, and like the rational mind starts these pros and cons lists and what ifs and kind of like options. But the truth of the matter was there was actually a moment for me when I was given the plan.
How so?
So 2019, I went on a 4-month sabbatical.
Okay.
And my intention was actually to sell the business. My intention was like, I think I'm done with this now. I was kind of falling out of love with my beloved, which was really scary. You know, I built this company out of love, and I was the face of it. I was the only shareholder. You know, like, it was basically, people would come in and say, wow, this is you, like the color, from the color palette to the logo. Like, I had really manifested myself in a gym atmosphere, and I was in love with it, kind of like a masterpiece. It was like, you know, it was lovely. And so when I was having these inklings that it wasn't satisfying anymore. There was something else. There was many kind of like waves of that, kind of in and out. But essentially I knew that was there, and I tried to repress it. And instead of completely repressing it, I thought, well, maybe I just need a break. It sounds, you know, 9 years into business, maybe I need a break. And so I went on sabbatical. That was really difficult because the mechanism, the mind, the routine was really strong in me. So I kind of woke up ready for the day, adrenaline, and there was nothing to do. And so I had to really face myself of like, wow, I don't know how to rest. I don't know how to be. I don't know how to, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't even know what to do with myself. Like, it was very disorienting.
I could totally relate. I mean, a lot of times as entrepreneurs and business owners, the business becomes not our identity, but it could feel like it's our identity, right?
Yeah.
So where'd you go on your sabbatical? How did that go?
Well, I stayed put in Ottawa
Okay.
for like a month or so. And this was the thing, was I was contending with myself. I would go to a coffee shop and start writing up business plans, you know, and that was just like how my brain functioned. I was kind of like an artist without art. I was like, you know, I was like building stuff, and I was like really aware that I was doing that, but I didn't know how to stop. And so I was like, I need to totally change the script here. Like, I need to get away, and I need something really radical. So I went to Hawaii, I went to Maui, and I did an insane retreat. It was, I think, 10 days.
Wow.
I'd lined up angel readers, shamans. I did like these incredible, like I basically connected with this woman, Janet, who owns Maui Healing Resort. Shout out.
Ooh.
And
Do you
she
recommend it?
Yeah, I do. She was incredible. Absolutely incredible. I basically like gave myself to her and said, I have this amount of time on sabbatical. This is what I'm going through right now. And she said, I got it. And she lined up all these practitioners, and she got this little cottage for me. It was totally custom. She got this cottage for me with a wild boar on the land. Anyways, that's a separate topic. And I basically, you know, I had this woman come with fresh avocados at lunchtime, and she would go to the market for me. And I basically just gave myself over to this process, and did hypnotherapy, did trauma release sessions. And yeah, I basically came out different than how I went in.
What was the difference?
Well, I'll tell you one of the processes. I had a hypnotherapist, and we did past life regression.
Okay.
And in this past life regression, I was a king, and I had a castle. And the imagery that came to me was that I was in this castle, and I could feel that something was wrong. And I could feel like but nothing was. The birds were chirping, my wife was over here, the kingdom was very peaceful and happy, but I knew something was up. And all of a sudden, I see from the distance a revolution coming. I see soldiers coming. I see this like bobbing of horses, and I'm like, oh my God. And I thought to myself, we're not ready. And I had this distinct feeling that I got too comfortable. I got too lazy. I got too complacent. And in that moment, I thought, we're not prepared. I wasn't prepared. We had been like maybe 20 years in peace.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't been used to fighting.
Yep.
And so this revolution was coming, all these soldiers were coming, all this stuff was coming. And in that moment, what happened, so all of it happened, and eventually I get the sword in the heart. And the last thing I said to myself was, I'll never let go of the details again. And that's how I died.
Mm.
And so in this life, I was paying so much attention to the details. I was building an empire, a company, and I had this past life energy of being afraid of letting go, afraid to go on vacation, afraid to be myself. And so I was able, through that session, to really kind of understand why I had this like almost workaholic energy where I felt really scared even though I had nothing to be afraid of. I would have these nightmares of, everything being taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I healed that. And when I healed that, I came out of that retreat ready to let go.
Wow.
And then, 2 months later, COVID went down, and I was in Barbados. A client had flown me out to work with him and his family in Barbados in March. And we flew back kind of urgently. And I opened the door to Epic, my gym.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the moment kind of I've circled back to now, which is I knew we would never operate again. I knew it. And I was like, ugh.
So what'd you do? Like you closed down or you sold it or?
We were in lockdown, so my operations manager had put everyone online. Everyone was happy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we made more money that month than we did like the previous 2 months because then, the community was rallying to fund small businesses.
Yep.
So everything was fine. It was only going to be a 6-week lockdown. We had a fandom. People really loved us, and we were providing a service that people really needed at the time, So I didn't really have too much to worry about other than like, what is this thing happening? But I got the message. I knew that we would never operate again, and there would never be people in there again.
Wow.
And not to say that I just like let it happen, that was kind of a moment. And like, then, moving from that was all the logistics and, hey, there's government funding and we can do this, and all of the tension and contention of really denying that truth until I finally actually just let go and I let the process happen.
So where's the running into the woods part? Is that after that?
Yeah, that's after probably 7 months of oscillating between seeing what funding there was, talking to my mentors, like people who helped me actually even originally invest in the company. I had built up some really incredible mentors and just kind of thought leadership back and forth, what's the best thing to do? But really, ultimately, it was really kind of going back to the ultimate mentor, which is spirit. And no matter how many conversations I had with really intelligent people, the truth was, the wisdom was that I had a choice to listen to deep, deep, deep wisdom or to listen to knowledge. And for the first time, and thankfully because of this sabbatical and what I had been through, I had really kind of been on the devotional path. Even before then, there was many moments where I listened and I was rewarded through hard times. But this one, I just knew it was massive. Also at the time, to your point of like living the dream, the Canadian American dream, I was really looked to as a leader in entrepreneurship. So people were looking to me about how I was going to function throughout this pandemic. And so to basically put the sword down and say, I'm out. I'm not going to give you guys advice. I don't know what this is. Was sort of a big, like from an ego, the savior part of me was like, don't leave people behind, give them hope. And I let it all go. So the woods part was after I just kept, it was one step at a time, one little itty bitty step at a time. For example, I had challenges like, what am I going to do with my trainers? And what am I going to do with my 300 clients?
Wow.
Like, what am I going to do with them? there's got to be, and I just held faith that there was an easeful, beautiful, highest way that that I just needed to listen to. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big problem. How am I going to solve this? And then the solution came. It was like this. It was like, here's the problem. And I was like, I don't know how to figure this friggin' thing out. As soon as I let go, I would walk all the time, during that time in nature. Mm-hmm. And then I heard the message, they want to be entrepreneurs. Give them the clients. I thought, brilliant. Mm. And so I met with my trainers and I said, I have something really tough to tell you. Epic is not going to operate anymore as Epic. But here's the good news. I know all of you work for me because I'm an entrepreneur and you're inspired. Every single one of them sat in an interview with me and said, I want to do what you're doing. I want to be as close to the flame as I can. And I said, here's your chance. You got 2 months, pick my brain, but I'm giving you those clients and you're going to start your businesses now. And they were like, ooh. I was like, I'm calling your bluff. You want to do this? Now's the time. And so I sat with them, Zoom calls, and we met in person. And so it was like that. Like there was a problem, like how am I going to do this part? And then this beautiful, benevolent solution that I got inspired by would happen, that I was just, okay, I'm going to offload that now. And then I would offload this part and I would offload that part. And then I ended up at the end of the day in Nova Scotia in my grandma's house with 2 suitcases. And that wasn't even enough. I had the message to go in the woods to be alone for an indefinite period of time.
Wow.
So I went on Airbnb and I booked this tiny cabin in Aylesford by Aylesford Lake. No one knows where this is. On a little mountain. You could even get access to it.
How'd you get there? You would walk
I got there by car, but that was super sketch.
Wow.
And I stayed there.
For how long?
I think I stayed there for I think it was 2 months. But honestly, it felt like eternity. It felt like eternity.
And what'd you do there?
Yeah. I just bead every day.
There was no doing.
There was doing. But so this is kind of how my journey spiritually has gone, where something happens through me and I just let go and let it happen. And then because I'm also philosophical and academic too, I really enjoy learning and studying and all that, I've found out that the process that was processing through me was something called bhakti yoga. I was basically in a bhakti yoga practice with no guru, no understanding of what was happening, no intention of doing it, but it was being done through me. And how it would happen was I just would start waking up really early. And I had these rules. Not that I made rules, but I was like, I'm not going to watch any television or shows. I'm not going to read. I'm not going to consume anything. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be really slow, and I'm going to every moment listen inside about what to do next. And if I didn't know what to do, I'd sit there. And so that would move me. And so I would sit, and it would be I did a lot of art therapy and see what would come out. And I'd be like, whoa, that's dark. I had a lot of body pain. For the first time, no email, no staff, middle of nowhere. I also ended a relationship. Mm-hmm. I left all my comforts. I sold my condo. I left TVs in the lobby of the condo to just take it all. I don't want any of it. And so, yeah, it was this practice of listening, and it would lead me to things like ceremony. I thought, not even thought. It was just tend to the fire, write things on paper that you are finished with, and put it in the fire. And I would cry and have these mystical experiences. And then I would try to stretch, and the body pain would come. And because I blocked all of it out, I was really, really able to see how simple stimulus, just dopamine of building a community and having emails come into my inbox and being part of a mission, how that really kind of
numbs you. Yeah.
it kind of just like gave a little veneer on what was really going on. And when I stripped all of it, it was like I had no idea how tired and how much in pain I was.
Wow.
No clue.
Super interesting. So let's fast forward to now. What do you do now? And then I have more questions, but
What do I do now?
Or I mean, we can keep the journey progressing.
No, what? Yeah.
It's up to you. Like how that was only a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you do now, and how does it tie to that?
So, I'm a spiritual therapist now, and so I work one-on-one with clients, mostly entrepreneurs. Funny enough, not that I intended, but it just kind of magnetizes to me in that way. And typically, people who are like I've seen as extremely intelligent, intellectually intelligent, where this is the thing about the ego being really smart, is it kind of works against the person as well. So although it builds incredible stuff and can really cleverly find its way through challenge, it can also self-implode in a way. And so I found that the more intelligent someone is intellectually, oftentimes they have the most suffering. Unless they can understand and have practices of what is this voice, and when is it working in my favor and when is it not, and am I this voice? No. And to develop the intellectual with intelligence, I'll say cosmic intelligence together.
Yep.
That is what I have understood as the next frontier of humankind.
It's really interesting. A lot of people probably also watching, so far, there's going to be a certain segment of people that are maybe going to bucket or maybe judge or just say, hey, this is batshit crazy. And I probably would have been one of these people 5 years ago, but I don't know, for whatever it's worth, Isaac Newton wrote more papers in metaphysics than he actually did in the real physical stuff, I believe. Your retreat to Hawaii, I was just reading Trailblazer by Mark Benioff, founder of Salesforce. Similar stories and stuff like that. He talks about the beginner's mind. He talks about like us constantly being on these rabbit holes and such. Steve Jobs and Mark Benioff both bonded because they were mentors together over spirituality, over things like those. So it's very interesting to see how all these pieces of the puzzle kind of come together to a universal truth. And now with technology growing, we're like at the fifth industrial revolution, really. And I think this fifth industrial revolution is like, okay, we've replicated all that intelligence, all that, what'd you call it, intellectualism, let's say, right? We've replicated all this. So what's the difference between a robot and a human? I think this is where we're getting to this. I would call it, I don't know, I don't want to forecast it, but I feel like there's a spiritual awakening or something coming up where people are realizing, wait a minute, we could replicate intelligence, let's say, the physical, smart brain stuff, but you can't really replicate or copy or artificially create this other source of wisdom. Right. What do you think about that?
Well, robots are not connected to the divine. So they don't really have any original ideas. They can mesh what's already there and innovate based on that, but there's no influx from the cosmic intelligence, which it's not conscious. They don't have consciousness. So without access to that, there is no creativity, really, in the most purest of way. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the world and humanity has always worked in polarities. So as much as there is that intellectual drive and functionality and convenience and all of that, there's gonna be the rise of the opposite, which is the sensual and the development of people who want to live off grid and they want to sustain themselves from their own food sources and catch their rain, and they want to live, a beautiful, sensual life in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And there's a lot more of that happening too.
100%. 100%. So like another thing that I was reading is scientific method, right? The ability, you know, in all modern day science, right? Whether you think of physics and you think of chemistry and stuff like that, revolves around the scientific method, which could easily be replicated by artificial intelligence, right? And the concept of the scientific method is we have a hypothesis and we're using science to back that hypothesis. So I have a theory that, I don't know, gravity exists, and then we do all these experiments and stuff like that, and we prove or disprove that gravity exists. The way I see that divine tethering is, well, where did the idea that gravity may or may not exist come from? And then you proved it. Sure, that's fine, but where did it come from? And that's where the fundamental belief, like everybody believes that their ideas are theirs, or everybody's egos believes that they're theirs, but are they?
Yeah, no. Of course not. But you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is that, you know, we have had so many evolutions of scientific materialism, as we call it. So the Cartesian kind of Newton split, which happened. Basically, it was when church and state split. Church and state separated, and we are living in basically the scientific kind of byproduct of that original decision almost to separate it. And so we have a lot of judgment, me too, inherently, and we call it physics envy in spirituality, which is we always try to prove that God exists. But we've missed the point. It doesn't need to be proven. As a mystic, you know or you don't know. If you don't know, you need belief. And so it doesn't, this idea of trying to prove is useless energy.
Yeah.
So the scientific method, you know, is the way to make sense of the impetus idea or the experience that is probably mystical. Einstein's ideas, he had said, weren't his, came from, you know, somewhere
whatever you
else.
want to call it, however you want to label it.
The mystery.
Yeah.
Came from the
Elsewhere.
mystery.
External.
Right.
Download.
And it is absolutely, it doesn't matter what you call it. Really doesn't. It's just that through the recognition that it is all that you need.
Yeah. This takes me back to when we first met. I don't know if you remember, but we met at a mastermind event, just like the one we're about to do here, and we just so coincidentally happened to be sitting at the same table at dinner and such. And I had gone on a journey where, you know, born Eastern Orthodox, grew up into the Orthodox Church. I didn't understand shit about the religion because obviously it's all chants and stuff like that. It's very, very, very old school. Saw some not so great stuff happen within Orthodoxy, thought I went down the atheist path or whatever. And then here I am sitting here and you're talking about the correlation of all religions, and you kind of transcended or separated spirituality and religion. It was very interesting. And then you would quote, you know, things from different faiths and then different everything. I remember we talked about all the different types of thinking, and it all kind of came into one. It was very interesting. How do you view this? Like, I don't know, all the arguments across the different religions and maybe the greater truth. And I know you did a lot of studying throughout your time. How does this all come together?
Well, I think it's just a consequence of travel and meeting a lot of different people, different cultures, and just having, you talked about the beginner's mind, like having fresh eyes to be able to notice what's the same. And as I would read the Bible or talk to someone who's Islamic or is a part of a Sufi order or was a metaphysician or into the occult, or I would say I was a promiscuous new ager before I went to Hawaii. You know, I'd have some crystals, and I did Kundalini classes, and I was really into yoga, mostly because I was into fitness. You know, there's a big kind of similarity there, especially as a woman, you know, 30-something. Yoga is part of, like, you know, fitness and training. And so spirituality is part of that, if you're open to it. And across all of that, and then really, you know, from Hinduism to Buddhism, and then the mystic traditions, Christian mysticism as an example, and, you know, the Tao, you start to notice how they're the same.
Yeah.
even something as, let's say, hard and rigid as Islam, you know, its mystical counterpart is Sufism, which is Rumi and poetry and the heart, the path of the heart. And when I was in my van, I was traveling in my van for 3 years, so I sold, you know, everything, and came out of the woods, and I heard from Spirit, buy a one-way ticket to Kelowna. And so I sold my car, the last few things I had. Sold my car, and I got rid of one suitcase. So I was down to one suitcase.
Wow.
And I booked a one-way ticket and went through another process, 3 months in that process. But what happened there was like, I don't know. I don't know. I felt the even the similarities with some of the tenets of Islam. So one of them is Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. So the understanding in Islam is that in your lifetime, you must make this pilgrimage, and people don't survive it. A lot of people, not I would say a lot, but people die, you know, and it's an ancient, hard, laborious thing to do. So when I was in the van and I had no agenda, I had nothing to do, nowhere to go, no one to serve, and mystically had basically given up the ego. I don't have a reputation, and I went to somewhere where no one knew me. The anonymity was freaking delicious. No one knew anything about me, and so it was great. I was noticing when I was in the van that I was on pilgrimage. And so I was reading about Islamic practices and reading about fasting and prayer, and, you know, Allah is the only God, you know, to assume Allah as your, you know, the only thing that is, there's one. And then to be on this pilgrimage, and I would end up in a monastery, and I would end up at SRF in Southern California, which is Yogananda's temple. And I would go to the river and intuitively do indigenous practices, you know, like give my blood to the earth as an example, or give my tears to the river, you know, just being at one with nature. And then to read that there's like prescriptive rituals that I had been intuitively doing, I couldn't deny that it was all the same. And even if it's religious, and I know there's a lot of corruption and a ton of, I'll say, inverted energy, which is like the devil, which is just ignorance and inversion of the benevolence of Spirit's energy. Spirit gives you energy, you do what you do with it. You got two choices.
Good or bad, yeah.
Right. You know, regardless of that, the benevolence of religion is it basically reverse engineered what was successful for its leader, the prophet, or, you know, Jesus, and said, hey, here's the script for life.
Go through the motions.
So, but kind of like what it didn't account for was like, you can't prescribe it, you only know it in hindsight. And what religion doesn't do, the mystical ones do, what religion doesn't do, the dogma, is it doesn't tell you it's inside. And so it has, this is it then takes the power away. And as long as you put the treasure out there, and if you put it into an authority figure like a priest, you know, there's going to be corruption.
100%.
Yeah.
So let's tie this back to using, like, obviously, you know, we work together, and a lot of entrepreneurs, I also think, come with, to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a fire, and a lot of times that fire typically starts out of some sort of trauma, right? Because like, no normal people that has no trauma, whether it's from this life, past life, generational, whatever, like, is probably gonna start a business or go through that pain to actually do so. So most entrepreneurs start a business, they have some sort of trauma, right? And then there's like this other theme of like all these other entrepreneurs with the, you know, what was it, the beginner's mind, and taking time away and stuff like that. How can we tie like spirituality or spirit back into entrepreneurship? And specifically, like, on my journey, like, without prescribing, because obviously we can't prescribe, like, how do I tie in spirit to build this empire, to build this impact?
Well, yes, I think trauma builds incredible companies. But like anything, the paradox is that spirit builds it too. You know, you can't, it's not just trauma that builds stuff. You know, there is something benevolent. We can't actually move forward with something unless we do. And that spark is that inspiration. There's something curious. There's something that, like, you know, the spirit, the soul has to express. It's almost like you don't have a choice. It's just going to happen. And I think the trauma can narrow the field so that it becomes easy to push away distraction and push away relationships and push away pleasure in a way and make challenge virtuous. And I think that that builds the skill set to be able to build great empires, but it does need, you can't build something you don't care about. You know, you can't build unless you have something. And that's the thing about the mission driven entrepreneur is like, there is something in the soul that it almost like saves the person. It gives them like the golden ticket. It's like this, just follow this. And the trauma gives the energy, the skill set to be able to build it. There's always this moment though in an entrepreneur's life where either they've hit a plateau of beauty, you know, they've kind of hit this place. Kind of in my story, it's like, I'm so used to fighting. What do I do when I don't got nothing to fight for? You know, it's like really jarring, you know, and I had actually fallen into kind of a depression. You know, I was 32 years old. I'd built the company and life of my dreams. And I thought, is this it? Like, did I just reach the peak of my life? Like, I can't do another 50 years of this.
I had the same exact thing happen. Like, I was 22.
Yeah.
And now that I look back, it's absolutely insane. Like, I just laugh on how I thought that was it.
Right.
Because it's hindsight, it's like, but you're right. You can't connect the dots forward.
No.
You can only connect the dots backwards, and only makes sense that way.
And the trauma, like, to make a beautiful life, in contrast, you know, I had a really challenging upbringing. I had been through a lot of stuff, and I had felt confined, and there was a lot of violence in my home, and there was a lot of stuff happen. And so when I was 32 and thought, wow, I fucking made this. Like, look at this. There's no negativity. I don't have toxic people in my life. I feel virtuous. I feel like I built something from the heart. I'm helping people, making a lot of money. I can live in New York for 6 weeks at a time and come back. I'm collaborating with people who are also similar to me and mission driven and, you know, have this like fire. And I thought, like, by contrast, I was like, okay, I did it, now what? And I couldn't be alone or by myself, or I didn't know who I was without it. Yeah.
It's almost like your basic human rights are taken away from you.
Yeah, and I wasn't in my body. Like, Stephanie didn't know who she was.
So what do you do about it? I mean, most people watching this, and even myself included, like, I've always thought, oh, sabbatical or whatever, but you know, I'll be the first one to say, hey, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just the ego speaking, but running into the woods for 6 months or however long might not be the thing. What does one do to work through and get closer and reset that beginner's mind and figure out who they are? How do entrepreneurs do that if they don't feel called to the woods, let's say?
One thing I've noticed is that I really feel that teachers, spiritual teachers, are brought to extremes. And so I really feel like my story is sort of intense. You know, I don't think that, and I don't think if I would have forced it, again, it happened to me, you know, and not in a victim way, but really in a surrender to divine way. I didn't feel like a victim at all. And actually, the story could have easily been, I lost everything, it was awful. That's not the story that I picked up, though. You know, I picked up a very different story, was that this was my chance to develop a relationship with God by listening. And I was rewarded handsomely, actually, and rewarded in ways I could never have been if I hadn't listened. But what I can say is, like, every single person is getting an intuitive hit. The potency of the intuition, which is giving you exactly what you need to know Exactly what is meant for you is happening without condition at all times to every single person, no matter what. The only thing I did was listen. And so if every entrepreneur just listens, and it could be very simple. It could be you're about to hire someone, and the skill set of that person is totally matching the role.
But you have that gut feeling.
But there's something, and it's silent. You know, it's like subtle.
Yep.
And usually it's against the grain.
Yep.
Like it's usually you're having, like, spirit kind of gives you assignments where you have to be contrarian. You have to believe it, and you have no explanation. And so if you just follow these threads, and even like from a metaphysical standpoint, you know, as you're building your company, if you assume metaphysical laws as your way of governing yourself, you will build something incredible. You know, law of cause of an effect, law of resonance, law of beauty, joy, freedom, law of harmony. Law of harmony, I used that law to build my company, which was basically like, in the times where I think that there's no harmony here, like there's arguing, there's like, I don't feel like anyone's believing in my mission, like I'm having to, like, I feel like a salmon going upstream. I would have that in the back of my mind, like, there is harmony here. Like, it's my problem that I can't see it. It's me. Or there's freedom here. I'd feel constraint, like I would get 2 resignations in my email inbox, and I'm about to go to New York City, and who's going to freaking fill this role, right? It's like, instead of the thing we say, the ego says, which is like, there we go again, you know, like, now I have to cancel my plans. It was like, no, law of freedom.
So I don't know. I mean, I think, like, my interpretation of what I learned out of all this is, I mean, I think twofold. One is, as entrepreneurs, the concept of mindfulness, the concept of just simply stopping and listening. And that comes across, I read Tim Ferry's book, Tools of the Titans, and he talks about it there. And, like, I think 80%, so he interviewed, like, I don't know, hundreds of billionaires. 80% of them have some sort of just meditative practice or, you know, silent practice within their lives on a daily basis. That's, like, one thing. 2 is, yeah, trust your gut when those intuitions happen. But the third thing that just keeps coming to me right now is the concept of belief. People don't believe anymore. They don't trust their government. They don't trust their religions. They don't trust anything external. But most importantly, they don't trust themselves. They don't trust that gut feeling is actually right because they're going out in their heads and such. So I think fundamentally we have to find a way to maybe get people to believe in themselves. And like you said, believe that it's all within. It's not external.
Yeah. Well, guess what? I'm not believing the ego either. I don't believe that shit. And I don't encourage people to believe the ego. So this is the thing around subtleties and why it's important to slow down and push away distractions and be with yourself so you can discern the difference between who is speaking. And that is really quiet. It's really subtle. You know, God does not yell very often. You know, it kind of yells in, like, illness and disease and accidents and, like, says, like, hey, you better wake up. You know, yes. And there's benevolence and all of that to say, like, hey, I need to, like, freaking pay attention here. But actually on a minute-to-minute basis, it's really quiet. And so it implores someone to learn how to be slow and to rest, especially in the times we're in. Because the only thing there is to believe is the wisdom buried deep in there. And why we can't access it is trauma, which is why I have been called to do this work to help people connect and come to the trauma to dissolve it so that I can deepen in my belief in myself. And to believe in oneself is to believe in spirit, to believe in the one, to believe in basically that which animates all, you know. And it's not a man in the sky belief. I don't believe in that. I don't recommend that. I think you've got to believe, you got to start here. Yeah.
This is awesome. This is absolutely beautiful, and I know we're coming up on time here, but where and thank you for sharing
Thanks for
all the
having
wisdom and the journey and such. Where can people find you if they they have more questions or if they feel so called to reach out to you?
Well, Instagram right now is the best place. You can
Awesome.
DM me there at Stephanie Karlovits. Website and stuff is work in progress, but it's coming.
Awesome.
But yeah, I work with people, and I feel so blessed to do that in a multitude of ways. But yeah, just DM me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.